I believe in being here. I think it's important.
Since you mentioned EyeWitness, I was wondering how is it doing now?
We have close to 35,000 videos and pictures.
Which model of the tribunal do you believe is the optimal?
It's so egregious.
What about damages?
Here in compensation, I don't see caveat.
Do you have any plans on the next IBA's
It
meeting?
would nice be to have a focus on Ukraine's victory.
Is there something you would like to say to the legal community of Ukraine?
Lawyers here inspire me, and I think they inspire the world.
Mark, welcome to Ukraine.
Thanks, Ina.
Now it's February 2023. It's been half a year, approximately half a year.
Yeah, about a half a year since I came the first time.
Yeah. We are very happy to welcome you again in Kiev, despite the circumstances. Could you please tell us what's the goal of your visit now and what has changed in half a year, if anything?
Well, the goal is twofold for me. One is simply to be here. I think, as I said the first time I arrived last September, October, I forgot, I believe in being here. I think it's important that people see me here and see the IBA here. And it was important for me personally to be here to show my support, admiration for all Ukrainians. And the second is to implement the projects that we started a little bit over a year ago when the war started, Russia's aggression against Ukraine. We spoke out forcefully against that. And also at that time, I believe that the IBA needed to initiate a series of technical assistance programs based on the needs of Ukraine. And so that's what I worked on for the last year. And so coming back a year later, and 6 months after being here the first time, I thought was important to continue to move the projects forward.
Absolutely, and we are very happy and honored to see you in Kiev. And it's important for Ukrainian community to feel this support and camaraderie and unity with our international partners. You mentioned some projects that IBA started working on, and maybe for those who listen to us and they haven't heard about them, could you please elaborate a little bit? What are your priorities in Ukraine and what is it that you're trying to do?
Yeah, I am happy to do that. I think a number of them were at the result of the UBA providing assistance to us and the partnership that we have. So that includes a very important project with the Ministry of Justice on the issue of legal aid for and support for defense lawyers who will undertake representation of those accused of war crimes here in Ukraine, including Russians, and as well as those that have been accused of collaborating with the enemy. And one could easily ask, well, why spend time on that? And my view is that Ukraine has to show that it meets international standards of fairness and impartiality when it comes to bringing accountability and justice to the country. And that requires that the trials are fair. And so that's a major project that we're doing with the Ministry of Justice, supported by all corners, actually, of Ukraine, in the sense of government entities, non-government entities, and I think that's really quite important. Another project we're doing is with the Ministry of Defense. That deals with issues of military police and military law in regards to Ukrainians' military. That too is a very innovative project that the ministry is doing, and we're happy to provide assistance to that as well. We're working very closely with the Prosecutor General's office here in Ukraine on accountability on a number of issues dealing with the issue of crimes, general crimes, crimes on the environment, asset recovery issues, and so that has been another area. We're moving into a fairly major support for the call for the Special Tribunal for the Crime of Aggression. So that has been one of our focal areas. So part of my meeting here is to continue to advance that. And finally, our EyeWitness to Atrocities project, which the UBA has been so central in helping us move that project out in Ukraine, and that project gathers evidence to be used in court cases, national court cases and international court cases, and so that's another major component. Those are just some of the ones. There are other ones, and of course we've been working directly with the Ukrainian Bar Associations and supporting the UBA on its projects as well. So,
which we're grateful for.
Well, we're happy to do that. And so I think these are core projects, but part of my reasons for being here this week is to move that project forward. And because I don't think this interview will go out until later, I will also say that I will be participating in the United for Justice conference that is taking place this week, but that remains confidential until the event is over. But I'm very much looking forward to being part of that, and I'll be speaking at that event on a panel concerning lessons learned about accountability. So lots of things are happening, and we'll continue to be here to support Ukraine as long as it takes. That's my view on this.
Thank you for being so involved in Ukrainian projects. For us, it's also important to work with you directly, which feels like a lot of support for Ukrainian legal community. Since you mentioned EyeWitness, I was wondering, how is it doing now? How is the app doing? How much footage do you have? And did you share the footage with someone already, internationally or nationally?
And again, this project, this unique technology of being able to collect evidence, pictorial evidence, pictures and videos that support the prosecution of those who have committed war crimes and other crimes. This has been a major effort for us here. It has been in many other countries, but nothing has reached the level that we've been able to reach here in Ukraine. I have to say, much of that is to the credit of the UBA for helping us launch this project here. We have, I think, close to 35,000 videos and pictures.
That's a lot.
Yep, that have come in. We have representatives in strategic areas in Ukraine, again, because of the partnership we have with the UBA that helps promote the app and the use of the app. And we have support from the Prosecutor's General's office and others. So we so far have, I think, been part of 7 dossiers that have been given to certain mechanisms, including domestic, but also international mechanisms that are looking at, ICC included, that are looking at particular cases, and we're able to provide that. And we're working with partners here in Ukraine, so we have several key partners that use the app in their work, and so that's the way it should be used. So I'm very pleased with how that project is going in Ukraine, and I think it's just going to continue to progress. So it's very good.
I was very impressed to see, since I believe it happened since our last interview, I saw this little video of how metadata of a footage can be manually and very quickly changed to something completely different. I believe a picture of something happening in Mariupol has been changed, the date and location has been changed to Manhattan, New York. And this is amazing. If it's so easy to
And that's why we created EyeWitness to Atrocities, because you can't do that with this app, because we would know immediately that somebody has attempted to tamper with the raw footage, and all that footage goes into a vault. In essence, that vault is with our partnership with LexisNexis, which is a major corporation, and they allow us to have the users send in that video and pictures, and so it can never be tampered with. And then we're able to look at it and then be able to forward that and use it in a way that accountability mechanisms need it. So it's a very powerful tool, but you're absolutely right. There's much out there, and of course pictorial evidence or pictures on YouTube and social media, they highlight the egregiousness of the crimes, but as you say, you can't ensure of their authenticity. With the EyeWitness app you can, and because you can use that in a court of law where information that you just get off the web, you just really can't do that.
You have mentioned legal representation in war crime cases, and this is something that's very important for Ukraine now, because all of a sudden many advocates have to represent interests of war criminals. What can you say to such lawyers? There's a lot of social pressure, pressure by society not to defend their interests, not to help their situation, because after all, we all saw the footage of Mariupol and Kyiv region, and why it's important, and is there something you would like to tell to defense lawyers who have to take such cases?
This is not new for Ukraine. Anytime you're asking a lawyer to represent somebody accused of the types of crimes that we've seen and we've witnessed here in Ukraine, it's a very difficult request. And it's very difficult for the public to understand it as well. As you say, why would we spend any time or effort to provide representation to a suspect accused of these types of heinous crimes? And you do so because it is the heart of justice. You cannot have a justice system that meets international standards of impartiality, fairness, without providing a robust defense to those that are accused of the crimes. And you want to give them a robust defense because in the end, if that individual has already been accused but is found guilty, you don't want anyone to question the validity of the process. You don't want show trials, the types of show trials that are taking place in Russia. And if you permit that, your credibility begins to falter dramatically. And I think it's part of Ukraine's legacy to ensure that Ukraine does it very differently than what Russia is doing, in that Ukraine adheres to these international principles and ensures that the trials are fair, and that requires defense. So I applaud, and I think these are real heroes, the lawyers in the profession who say, it's not easy for me to do this, but I'm part of a legal profession that requires that there is this type of defense. And this is, as I said at the start, this is the heart of justice, and that's why you do it.
Thank you so much. When it comes to general framework of accountability, do you see any major changes since September when you were here last time, internationally or nationally? Has something changed? Are we closer to accountability?
Well, I think I was always somewhat, in many ways, surprised, but also impressed that those that I spoke to when I was here in September, even prior to September, really had a focus on this issue of accountability, justice, domestically, internationally. And in my lifetime, in my professional lifetime, I've never witnessed as much attention on accountability and justice as I have here in Ukraine and with the war here in Ukraine. Governments talk about it, the public talks about it, everyone's talking about it. And that, I think, is very positive, because the international community believes, and I think even more so now of what's happened in Ukraine, that those that commit these crimes have to be brought to justice. They have to be given defense, as I said before, but in the end, the international community is calling on these individuals to be brought to justice. So it's a major effort, and that effort has increased dramatically since September to now. There's been great progress made, as I say, about domestic prosecutions, and that's a real challenge here in Ukraine, as it would be for any country in conflict, but particularly because there's not a rich history here of knowledge, a knowledge base and experience in undertaking, for instance, war crimes trials. It's new. And yet, the way international justice is structured, the majority of trials will in fact be domestic. The majority of proceedings will be domestic proceedings, not at the ICC, not at the International Criminal Court. Those will be limited, important nonetheless, but limited. So you're going to see a matrix here that has a number of players, number of accountability mechanisms. Domestic accountability mechanisms is one, the International Criminal Court is another, countries using universal jurisdiction to bring to justice, that's another area. And of course, the major focus that everyone speaks about is the proposed special tribunal for the crime of aggression. And that is quite new. We haven't seen that since discussions about since the Nuremberg trials about the crime against peace. And so I think everyone's focused on that. But I would suggest that they need to be in parallel with the other mechanisms to ensure that those that are committing crimes now on the territory of Ukraine, that they are brought to justice as well. In addition to going after the leaders, which the crime of aggression is a leadership crime, and
masterminds.
Yes, that's exactly right. It's people talk about Russia being the aggressor state, and they certainly are, but international criminal law focuses on the individual, so you focus on those at the highest level, and we know who those are, and the question is whether the international community has the political willingness to create that type of mechanism, and whether or not we can move over the legal hurdles that exist in trying to bring a sitting head of state to justice outside an international criminal court. So those are all challenges, but these are good challenges for us to have because it means people, as I said at the start, are focusing on justice and accountability. That's a good thing.
Indeed, even some countries that were known to be a bit skeptical about the tribunal, like France, for example, UK, the USA, your home base, they seem to step up their efforts and in supporting the tribunal, at least publicly. And even in the US, if I'm not mistaken, there's a bill registered supporting the tribunal.
Yeah, I've always thought, I don't think that you're going to find any Western countries that publicly speak out against a special tribunal or a special mechanism for the crime of aggression. I don't think politically that is probably acceptable. Where you are going to have challenges is the nuances, the devil's in the details. It's saying yes, we support this idea of some mechanism for the crime of aggression, but then countries will diverge, and they'll say, well, this is the way it should be done. We shouldn't create a special standalone. We should have it being done domestically or a hybrid approach. So this is where the challenge will be. But I agree with you. A year ago, I don't think many people were realistically talking about a mechanism for the crime of aggression. It just wasn't spoken about. Now, everyone's speaking about it. That's a big shift.
What's your gut feeling? How the support by the American government, will it change after elections? There are a lot of discussions about how now...
You mean general support for...
Yes, for the tribunal in case of...
You know, I'm a dual citizen, as you know, in the United States, U.S. and a British citizen, very proud of that. I've lived in Britain for the last 23 years, but still have significant ties and significant work in the United States. I've always felt, not simply because I was born there, that the United States plays an absolutely essential role in justice. Not always, they don't always get it right. I've never agreed with their position on the International Criminal Court, of them not supporting the Rome Statute, of withdrawing from that, signing it and then unsigning it. But at the same time, when we look at other justice initiatives like the International Criminal Tribunal for the Former Yugoslavia or for Rwanda and many others, it's really the United States that's been on the lead. So on that point alone, I'm very happy that the United States has dramatically shifted its position. Certainly since the previous Trump administration, this administration is much more inclined to, well, at least not to try to derail the International Criminal Court as the Trump administration did. This administration clearly sees advantages in cooperating with it. But that's a long way from getting to a point of embracing and signing the Rome Statute and ultimately enacting it. I don't think that's going to come anytime soon, but you don't necessarily need that to happen so long as the United States plays a positive role in relations to the International Criminal Court, and I think they are playing a positive role. Now, to the larger question about the general U.S. support here in Ukraine to counter Russia's aggression, here is where President Biden, I think, has played the key role. I can objectively say that without President Biden, I simply don't see what in the last year, the type of coalition building and the movement that has occurred to provide support to Ukraine, particularly military support. I think this is one of President Biden's greatest legacies will be this. It's not to take anything away from European countries, including the one I live in, the UK. They have all played a role. But the United States has played a particularly important role. So the question, well, what happens if President Biden, assume he runs for president again, loses, and the Republicans come in? We know now the Republican Party is already questioning whether or not the United States should continue to support Ukraine. Nothing new there. That's happening. So this election that comes up next year is very, very important, not only for the United States but for Ukraine, actually.
Since you mentioned the International Criminal Court, amending ICC jurisdiction is still being viewed as one of the options of addressing the crime of aggression against Ukraine. What do you think about this option? What are disadvantages? Is it possible?
I don't think there's any disadvantages of it. If you were to amend the special conditions that are associated with the crime of aggression under the Rome Statute, so that the crime of aggression is is implemented, it's seen in the same way of the other crimes, of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, then you would solve this difficult situation that we have now, where you cannot, the ICC cannot pursue the crime of aggression against a non-state party. Russia is not a state party, so therefore completely is out of the ICC's jurisdiction on the crime of aggression. Nor can the ICC prosecutor pursue a crime of aggression against any state party who has opted out of that crime. So you can't opt out of the crime of genocide. You can't opt out of the crimes against humanity or war crimes. And nor can Russia, in essence, opt out, because for those crimes, a non-state party that has committed crimes on the territory of a state party, or a territory of a party of a state that has accepted the jurisdiction of the ICC, which is what Ukraine has done twice, but with the crime of aggression, it's completely reversed. So if amending the Rome Statute to make the crime of aggression equal to the other crimes, I would support fully. And I think that would solve the problem without question.
So what's
but it's a political process here. And it takes, I think it will take time to do that. You have to have the state parties involved with it, and I think it's complex. It's not impossible, and there are certainly, as I say, people that are trying to promote that, and I certainly would agree to it and support it. But for right now, you're looking at different avenues outside of the International Criminal Court. That's what the focus is on right now.
Special tribunal.
A special tribunal focused on the crime that the International Criminal Court cannot utilize in this war. So you have to find a new way. But there are challenges in relations to the political willingness of states to create a mechanism to do that. There are legal hurdles with head of state immunity that still exist if you're creating something that's outside for instance, the Security Council or outside a tribunal, because international tribunals don't recognize head of state immunity. You're going to run head first into this head of state immunity, which means Putin and others, high-ranking officials, cannot be...
Troika.
Cannot be, yeah, exactly. Troika is correct. So cannot be pursued. You can investigate, but you can't indict, and you can't arrest. So the international community now is trying to create a mechanism that would bring the same legitimacy as an international tribunal created by the Security Council or by the ICC or through state parties. And because it's not possible to create a special tribunal through the Security Council because of Russia being a permanent member, would veto that, China as well, I suspect. Then you're being pushed into the idea of, well, how do we create in whole cloth a tribunal? And the idea here that is getting a lot of traction is for the UN General Assembly to show its support for this tribunal and for Ukraine to, in essence, enter into an agreement for a special tribunal to be created. And then willing states would, in essence, create that special tribunal. And I think if you had the right number and the right states, the right nations that come together, you could probably get over that hurdle of head of state immunity.
So basically you're saying that an ad hoc hybrid tribunal established based at the model of the Nuremberg Tribunal is possible, and it might overcome sovereign immunity?
It might. I still think it's a. You know, it's still a hurdle here. There's still challenges here, but I think it's worth the effort. On that, but we know that there are states who, getting back to my point, that I don't know of any state, Western state, that is publicly saying we're not going to support any type of tribunal. What they're doing is saying, well, we don't support that type of tribunal, but we'll support a hybrid tribunal here in Ukraine, which would be based on the Ukrainian legislation to do that. But that has its own problems, both domestically in Ukraine's constitution, and the idea of what I said about head of state immunity. I'm not sure if it's a court that's established here under Ukrainian law for the crime of aggression, and even though you could get over some of the constitutional hurdles of creating a hybrid type court, even if you could do that, I think you're still facing the issue of the prohibition against pursuing of a third state, in this case Ukraine, pursuing a sitting head of state. I just don't see how you get over that. So that's
basically a UN-based tribunal would be
the UN supported through a General Assembly resolution that would support the creation of a special tribunal specific to the war in Ukraine and specifically targeted leaders in Russia. I think is the best avenue. And those that would argue, because I think some states would be concerned about creating a precedent that would come back and haunt them later on. You could see the United States thinking, well, if there was a special tribunal for the crime of aggression, some of the past acts that we've made would clearly put us in line of sight. They don't want that. But I think there's a very strong legitimate argument to make that this act from Russia and from its leaders is the most egregious that we've seen since World War II. And I include my involvement in the former Yugoslavia during the Yugoslav wars. But that pales in comparison to me than what Russia has done. So my position is, if there's any time for the international community to come together and to say we're going to enact a special tribunal for the crime of aggression targeted at leaders in Russia, this is the time to do it. Because again, it's so egregious that if you can't justify doing it now, I'm not sure what are you waiting for. So that's where I would see it. And that comes back, it depends on the number of states that would support it and what states support it. Because it's not just it's both about the numbers and I don't like to say quality of state. I think that's a bit rude. But the weight. You have to have certain states have to be part of this. And if they're not, then it loses its credibility. It loses its legitimacy. And you have to have legitimacy for a creation of a special tribunal in order to get over some of these legal hurdles.
Who would be judges and a prosecutor at a tribunal? How do you manage
it would be the same way that, the model would probably be more like the ICC model, where you have states that have come together that have a common purpose, a common goal, and they would establish the rules, they would establish the evidence rules, they would establish the selection of judges. I think the ICC is actually the model that you would follow, because the ICC is not an UN Security Council mandated court. It's one of like-minded states that have come together to create the International Criminal Court. The same would be here.
Speaking about UN and Security Council and General Assembly, it seems like it's a clear UN mandate to establish tribunal to react to protect peace and security in the world. And yet it seems like that other organizations like Council of Europe, European Union, they seem to be more aggressive when it comes to chasing perpetrators and establishing accountability mechanisms. It seems like the UN system is a little bit more reserved. What's happening? How do you evaluate what's happening? What's your assessment of the situation? Does UN repeat the fate of the League of Nations?
No, I don't think so at all. I think I mean, you have to give the UN credit in the sense that I've just mentioned about UN Security Council resolutions that have created a tribunal. So it's not as if they haven't done it. They've done it a number of times. They've also done supporting the creation of kind of a domestic or / hybrid tribunals, the special tribunal special court that was created in Cambodia is a good example of that. So I actually think the record of the UN when it comes to these issues is actually quite strong on this. But there's no hiding the fact that if these courts are Security Council created courts, you need the support of the Security Council and you need the support of all 5 permanent members. And there are some you're not going to get that. And this is an example of where you're not going to get that. And you just have to accept that. I mean, I know there's an argument of saying, well, the whole UN system needs to change, the Security Council structure needs to change, but...
Do they need to change?
Well, whether they need to change or not, I look at it in a much more realistic way. Is there a legal basis to do that? I don't see it. It's the charter is the charter. But I think my preference would be that you accept the weaknesses that exist within the United Nations structure. They certainly are. But you also accept the fact that it is the one entity, it is the one legal body that brings every nation together, good and bad. I think there's worth to that. I think there's room for that type of entity and organization. Even with all its flaws, there's a need for that. And one has to recognize you're not going to be happy all the time with what it does. That's just the reality. Nothing's perfect. No.
So it seems like when it comes to, well, definitely there's a lot of progress at the international level. There's a prosecutor's office established and tasked with specifically the crime of aggression and collecting information. So it seems like it's a little step in the right direction, and we're looking forward to this little activity being transformed into full-fledged tribunal eventually. At the same time, the government of Ukraine actively works on damages, on establishing the international register of damages. We know that it will be established at The Hague, and various countries are approaching the issue of damages and seizing and arresting Russian assets on their territory. Canada is one of such states. Do you observe any similar initiatives by the UK or the US, countries you're most familiar with? Is there any?
Yeah, I think you have the same. I think you have the same type of I think political willingness to create a compensation mechanism. I think is there. Unlike the political willingness to create a standalone special tribunal for the crime of aggression, which I said most states are not going to publicly say we're not going to do that. Most states will say, yes, of course we're supporting it. But behind saying that, there's caveats. Here in compensation, I don't see caveats on this. I see legal challenge. There are legal hurdles that exist for compensation mechanism on this. But both incentive going up to private assets, which you're seeing happening all the time, but that will only get you so far. You really need to be pushing towards state assets. But we've seen that happen before, with Iran, Iraq, and I'm confident that the international community will come together for that. Yeah, I mean, it's not as if it's not. The other thing too, you're not necessarily having to talk about for legitimacy the way, in the sense of the number of states that are involved and the weight of the states that are involved, as I've described to you for the Special Court for Crime of Aggression. Russian assets are not in 200 countries. The majority of it is in a fairly smaller mix. So you just need those countries to come together and create a mechanism. I think that will happen.
Can we use EyeWitness and all the footage accumulated by the EyeWitness for towards damages?
Yeah, absolutely. And the EyeWitness app and the collection of damages. I know that the EyeWitness app has been used a lot to film damages of buildings, hospitals, schools, even though they will be rebuilt now. I was surprised when in September I went up north when the invasion, the area where the invasion first happened, and I was surprised at how much rebuilding was taking place. I won't have time to go this trip, but I've been told that rebuilding is going at a very fast pace. If that's the case, it's even more important that the evidence of the damages was captured, because there's still a compensation claim there. And so EyeWitness, the footage that EyeWitness has of this is, I've been told, is quite significant. So yes, it's exactly what has to happen. It's gathering all that information, because compensation can take a while. You know, it can take a very long time, as history shows. But nonetheless, you need that base, an evidentiary base first, and that's why EyeWitness, I think, can play such an important.
That's very useful indeed, to have that footage preserved and ready to be used.
Well, it's a necessity, to be quite frank, because it's an easier claim to make when you're saying, well, this was my business. Yes, you can go to it now. It's rebuilt. We've had to rebuild it ourselves, but it was destroyed, and we want to be compensated for it. And they have the right to be compensated for it.
Yes, hopefully. We spoke about these questions and other issues concerning Ukraine during the IBA's annual meeting, which took place in Miami last year. And thank you again for putting Ukraine on the agenda. It was very important to touch on these subjects with, legal representatives from so many countries, from so many parts of the world, and we organized that business breakfast together dedicated to Ukraine. Thank you again for your support in drawing lawyers' attention to what's happening in Ukraine and in offering this wider perspective on why it's important for legal community to be involved. Do you have any plans on the next IBA's meeting?
Well, I'm hoping the next, the next meeting is in Paris in the fall. It would be nice to have a focus on Ukraine's victory in the fall. So not talking about the same thing we talked about in Miami. It'd be nice to have President Zelensky come back to the IBA, as he did in Miami, videotaped a message saying, we won this, and thank you for everything that you've done to help us. But
maybe in person, maybe he'll be
maybe in person on that. That would be nice. I wouldn't know how I would respond to him if he's actually showed up in a suit. I think that I would.
That's how you know that the war is.
Yeah, that's probably right. You're probably right. So yes, whatever the status is of the war, the IBA conference in Paris will definitely be focusing on it, no question. And we just have to wait and see how how it progresses. But yeah, we'll definitely be doing that. Yeah. It's important that the legal community, still stays engaged. And of course, you asked me about kind of the possibility of the waning support from the United States and perhaps elsewhere, and that's a reality. I don't think anyone should hide from that. I think that's a reality of the situation. And because that's the reality of the situation, it's even more important to gather and garner support to continue to move, continue to progress in assisting Ukraine. And I think the legal community has a responsibility to do that, and we'll certainly do that.
How? This is a very good question. We as lawyers, we often talk on what is it that we can do if we're not politicians, not decision makers, we're not leaders of the country to make specific decisions on accountability. What can lawyers do? What can regular?
Well, first of all, I think lawyers do play a very important role, because oftentimes in positions of power and authority, many are lawyers. So the legal profession, I think, does play a very important role, even whether it's in parliament, whether it's in government entities. The role of lawyers is essential. Now, the role of the legal profession outside that is still very, very important, because the legal profession, I think, first and foremost, is founded on principles, on legal principles. And for me, in becoming a lawyer, I took that to heart, that justice is again at the heart of what I talk about, what I speak about, whether that's justice on the very basic level of representing somebody who's been falsely accused of a crime, or helping helping a family receive compensation for damages. Whatever it might be, that's justice. It's access to justice, and it's ensuring that the individual is able to gain justice. Well, here, we're talking about the same principle, but just at a very different international level. But it comes down to justice. It comes down to violating, as Russia has done, some of the most basic principles of international law. And lawyers of whether you're in business, whether you're in entertainment, whether you're in family law, whatever it is, I think lawyers, as part of the legal profession, getting back to the legal profession, has a responsibility to speak out and demand that justice is accorded its opportunity.
Both Ukrainian and foreign lawyers, because UBA has around 60 foreign members, and you're one of them, and thank you again for joining.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think we share, that's one thing we all share. If we're lawyers, we share this idea that we have a responsibility to speak out against injustice and to support justice. And we need to speak out against the injustice here that has occurred against Ukraine. All lawyers have responsibility to do that. I really, truly believe that. And so this is the most important thing that one can do. And then in addition, there are practical things that lawyers can do. They're assisting in representing, and I know the UBA does this a lot, and your members, and assisting those that are affected by the war. Helping the citizens get through this labyrinth of laws and regulations that are difficult to do, and getting members of the UBA to help on that, as you've done. That's something lawyers do, and that's an example of what the news.
It's very important that you said that, and I believe I asked you this last time, and I cannot help myself but ask again. What would you like to say to lawyers of Ukraine? Because the world as we know it is gone. The legal profession in Ukraine, I think, is reinventing itself. We're facing a whole new reality. We are thinking about our mission in this world and in this context. What is it that we can do? Is there anything you would like to tell specifically to the lawyers?
Well, the only thing, I think that lawyers who I've worked with so far in Ukraine, and those at the level of the Bar Association, in the level of the legal profession, whether it's from the Ministry of Justice, or the prosecutor, Prosecutor Kostin, these to me are just inspirational people for me, and lawyers here inspire me, and I think they inspire the world on this, and so for the lawyers here in Ukraine, you just have to keep projecting the struggle and the fight that you are in, because that in turn inspires the rest of us to help you on this. Whatever we do to assist the legal profession here is based on, as I said before, based on this common family that we're all part of the legal profession, and that's why I think you have many lawyers, foreign lawyers, who are trying to help and are supporting you, and I don't think that will go away. I think that will stay.
Hopefully. Well, thank you a lot.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to be here. Thanks for all you do and all what the UBA does, and thanks for the partnership with the IBA. It's really been important.
The pleasure is ours, and we're grateful. We're happy to see you again. We hope that you'll enjoy your stay and that you will achieve all the goals you put in front of yourself for this visit, and we hope that the event in Lviv goes well, and it's going to be a little bit warmer than it is now. And come back again, hopefully after the victory.
I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Ina.